Morning, Sonia. What am I seeing in the background? Is that League of Legends? Is that what's going on? I see.
Hello, can you hear me all
Hello.
right? Or
Yeah, I can.
let me just fix that. Oh, that's better. I It sure is. And thank you for that's better now. I can hear. Thank you for mentioning it. Yes, there's only a couple of people that work it. Yeah, I'm just so addicted to it. I'm absolutely dog shit at it. But I just love. Do you game at all, or do you play any games, or
Yeah, I do.
what do you do?
What do I do?
What games do you play? Yeah.
Mostly console stuff, to be honest.
Oh,
So,
nice. What's your latest? What are you doing?
Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
Very
Medieval
nice.
knight
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. Good morning,
Good, good,
Chantel.
good.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Yourself?
Good.
That's good. I will just give us a minute
Mhm.
to see what I can do, though, is give you both just a link that I'll put in the chat so you can have a look at something. I'll drop
Mhm.
that link in there if you're looking for a little initial activity. And then I'll start doing the talking part in just a minute. Good morning, Michelle.
Morning, Lachlan.
We're just waiting to see. I will begin in approximately 20 seconds. But I have just put a link into the chat, which I will do again for those
Yeah.
of you just coming in. And we might talk about it in just a moment. Today's session is on audience engagement tools. We are going to be looking specifically at Mentimeter in detail. And then I'll also on the back end be talking about the Zoom suite of audience engagement tools, which includes surveys, polls, and quizzes. And we will look at the difference between those. It's probably about a 70-30 split in terms of time. I'd like to spend more time on Menti. It involves more. Um, but the back end will be looking at those Zoom tools as well. So let's get into it. I did share a link to an initial Menti just to kind of get the creative juices flowing and people think about something, and it should have been sent to a page that was asking for something like this with a bit of feedback, 3 responses possible from you, but as many times as you wanted if you wanted to. And in terms of the actual results being collected, if I was to look at the results page, I can see those being updated here. This is the Mentimeter creator interface. So it's interesting that it shows me both the results as they come in real time, but also the ability to edit the activity. This interface actually changes once every 3 months or so. So interestingly, what you would normally be sharing with your participants when you're using these sorts of tools is probably a results page that doesn't have all the editing and things in it. So you can do that by using this present option up the top, and that will give us all of that white noise has disappeared. It's now just the actual results as they come in. So this is a word cloud, and we'll see that it behaves the same way that word clouds do, in that if more than one person has the same response, the words get bigger, etc., and more present on the page. So we can see maybe that more than one person suggested the assembly. I don't know. But yeah, it'll just keep rotating and updating live in real time. The other thing we can see here is that 4 people have completed the activity, and I will keep putting the Menti activity in the chat. And I'm actually going to move on to another one. So now, if you use the same Menti link in your browser, or if you've got the same page open, you'll see that there is now another activity requiring a different type of input. Still getting the audience to make choices. And this is using the 2 truths and a lie format, if you're familiar with that. And I can see those updating on the screen as the results come in. Which is the lie? Interestingly, that's quite funny watching those go. And we can see here that not only have I got text, I've also got visual stimuli as well going on. There's images that have been added to the choices. And then this is then an amazing talking point for us. At that point, I'll just admit anyone else that's coming in. There we go. We're just looking at an initial Menti activity, which I'll drop into the chat for those of you just coming in now. So we have, out of 6 people that have voted, we have an even split on which of these responses people think is a lie. The lie is, in fact, I'm not scared of clowns. So that's where it is, in case you're interested. Do love Italian. I do have an ancestor that was a pirate of sorts. He used to grab slaves and treasure and other things in the islands and then bring them towards Queensland somewhere way back when. Anyhow, a third Menti activity, and then we're going to do a little bit of talking. Same again. Use the link that I've put into the chat to put in your responses, and this is requiring you to organize your response in a slightly different way. And I will talk about this activity type in just a second. So have a think about it. How are you spending your Saturday? So we've moved a little bit beyond multiple choice, so to speak, or click a single response. This is actually asking you to do some thinking and allocating of the resources available. And we can see a response in here already with the points spread. This activity type is actually called 100 points, and it asks you to make choices about how much of those points you want to allocate to different response types. I've turned it towards something fairly mundane, but maybe you might be able to think about some application for this if people are having to do some thinking about, again, whether it's resources, whether it's thinking about their own activity or process. And I can see we've had 6 responses coming in and people are getting those in fairly quickly. The other thing to note is that we also have an option up the top for participants just looking at a screen and that haven't been given a link to engage with the activity at the top. We can tell them basically go to menti.com and use this code to join. I've just given you the link in the chat because, to be honest, I've found that this is generally the easiest way if I'm in particularly this format online with a group of people in Zoom or otherwise in Teams, etc., to give them the actual link directly to engage with the activity. It doesn't really require any assumption from me that you know what to do with a QR code or to go to a particular website or that you can read an instruction. Those are all logical things to assume. However, I've circumvented all of that and just said, click on this link. So that's why I generally provide people with the link to Mentimeter activities, whether or not I'm providing other instructions. All right, let's hop out of this results screen and we'll do a little bit of talking. So we just had a look at 3 different activity types in Menti, and it's one of our audience engagement tools that we're going to look at today. As I mentioned, we're going to look at Menti, Zoom Polls, Zoom Quiz, and Zoom Survey. And the reason we're doing that is because we're talking about audience engagement tools which have appeal probably for a variety of reasons. I've captured some of them here. They do provide a different way of engaging with the presenter, with your peers. Potentially it might be lifting the energy level in the room, or that could just be me on my second coffee at 9 o'clock. It's also another way to capture ideas and feedback from the audience, makes them feel potentially that their input is valued or valid in that space rather than just a fairly, I suppose, passive experience. Gives alternate channels to have their own needs identified potentially. You're switching between our sort of traditional didactic modes of teaching into more of a collaborative space, depending on how you use the tools. We've got timing questions that we're going to talk about today, whether you're doing it in a synchronous space like we are here, and I'm getting feedback on the spot, responses on the spot, and doing things with those? Or can we switch that into an asynchronous mode of delivery, which means does the tool allow us to do that in some way? And we will look with Menti at how that can be done. Which then leads to considerations around if it can be used asynchronously, do we then need to think about our activities in terms of pre, during, or post event? Are there things people do before getting together in person, live, etc., or after the event? How does all of that link together? Moving right along, I'm going to show you another activity type or a collection of activity types, and then we're going to look at the Menti interface. So here is the link to the Menti. I'll put it into the chat again in a second if I need to. I will open up the results page. And we will have a look at the results as they go in. So hypothetically, we have a big assignment that's coming up. You are a group of students thinking about getting ready for that task or not, as the case may be. And here we have a selection of Mentimeter activities that have been organised to help gauge preparedness and identify areas of need potentially. So the first one, we have a scales activity, which is asking the audience to identify how much they've done of different activity types. So now we've got sliders, and I can see people are engaging with that on the spot. Doesn't really need a whole lot of instruction. People are just clicking and doing and moving and engaging with it. So this is scales, and this is saying at the moment, most people have taken the time to look through the subject outline, thank goodness. And maybe some of them, if they know that hack, that if you look through the marking criteria, you're going to be able to do the assignment to the highest possible level. Who knows? Maybe we're just thinking wishfully. All right, moving along to the second part of this gauge. Which parts are we struggling with? This is a ranking activity in Mentimeter, which is asking you to prioritize. Order them. And at the moment, it looks like the structure of the task is the most problematic. That may change over time, but this one simply is a drag and drop to order priorities. Oh, the lit review. It's always the lit review. Okay. And moving right along to an open response activity type, which allows you to type in your input into the task. And someone has identified the hardest part is writing it, the easiest part's doing the research. Fair enough. And more responses will filter into this space. Don't stress if you haven't put anything in here. I'm simply demonstrating different activity types, the word limit, etc. So we've just gone through in under 5 minutes. It also has a Q&A function if you wanted to utilize that live. I generally don't with Menti use the Q&A that much. There are other channels to capture that feedback. So you just got a crash course or a crash introduction to 8 different Mentimeter activity types within minutes, and you managed to engage with all of them without pretty much any instruction at all other than here's a link. So this tells me straight away that this is a tool that's probably going to be easy for you students to engage with as well. And now we're going to have a look at how we use it. Does that sound okay? I can see some nods. Excellent. All right, so we start our journey with Mentimeter at the address mentimeter.com. I'm going to log out so that you can see the initial screen. All right, so this is mentimeter.com, and when you come into this space, what you need to know is that CSU has a paid enterprise license for this product, which means you can use it as much as you like. Build as many mentees as you like, either privately or shared with your peers, but it's going to require your work login. And the way that we get to that is that you either, if you have an account, you'll be using login. If you don't have an account, you'll use sign up. Either way, it's going to point you towards an option that says SSO, which is single sign up. And the way that we do that is to find that word. So when you're signing up for the first time down the bottom there, single sign on, SSO. And at that point, it'll ask you to identify the institution, Charles Sturt University, and then you'll be able to use your work login to get into the tool. Very quick and easy. Don't bother with any of this other stuff. Find SSO. As for me, I already have an account, so I can go to login. Again, there's single sign-on, SSO, Charles Sturt University, continue. And it will now take me into the Mentimeter dashboard. So the homepage in Mentimeter is divided like this. You've got some menu options on the left, and on the right-hand side, it will show you the presentations that you have already. It will also show you other Mentimeters being used within our group account if they're public, which basically means everyone at CSU that has access to Mentimeter will be able to see them. You can make either or type of activities. You'll notice on the left-hand side, if I zoom in a little bit here, that we have a spot for workplace presentations, and if you create them in there, everyone else will be able to access them as well. Maybe you want that if you have a team of people needing to use the same mentees and you want others to be able to edit with them or collaborate with them on those activity sets, build them in here. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with my presentations. And in this spot, you have the ability to create folders to organize your presentations, or you can just start building them on the spot and move them later. You'll notice that underneath the 16 folders apparently that I have, underneath we have all of the individual presentations listed as well. So you can open them through there, or you can drill down to the folders where they might be. What I'm going to show you is the process of building a Menti from the ground up and what we go through to get there. Now, please feel free to come off mute if you need to ask me things, or put them into the chat, or raise a hand, whatever you want. I'm happy to stop and talk to those points when and where we need to. For now, what I'm going to do is click on New Menti. And this is our build interface, our build screen. So the way I'm going to unpack this for you is think about Mentimeter as a presentation tool. So like PowerPoint, it works in the language of slides that you build. On those slides, you can build individual activities. You could also build content if you wanted to. And within each of those activities that you build, students will be able to engage with them. And Menti talks about student engagement using the word voices, which basically just means responses or things like that. So if you see that word, don't be thrown by it. So I'm going to build one individual activity at this point. It's asking me if I want to use templates or import things, but I'm going to steer you away from those and say, let's start from scratch. And now it will give me a choice of the type of activity I want to create on my one slide. So at the moment, I can choose between multiple choice, and you can see that you have a choice with multiple choice between using your standard kind of bar responses like this. You can put in images, etc., if you want to get that sort of stimulus. So let's choose that first. This is what it looks like currently. This activity is already live. Up the top, I can give it a name. And if I click in the area, I've got different areas on the slide that define the activity. I've got the prompt question, which is also called a label, which I can put in here. The sky is which color? And then within the actual choices for the audience, I can then define those, right? So I could go blue, green, red, whoops. And at that point, you can see on the right-hand side next to each of my options as I define them, I can also add in images. So if you wanted more than just the word and the bars, you can add images next to them. And if you recall when we had our truth or lie activity earlier with the choices that had images on top, that's how I've added the images. Very, very easy. I can choose between representing the information in bars, a donut graph, split it into a pie, for example. So there's lots of versatility in terms of how you define how you want the activity to look to participants. I can add more options if I need to. And then we have a little bit of customization. Do we want to show the correct answer to people or not? Do we have multiple choices, options available so they can choose more than one thing? And do you want the responses to be shown live? That's on by default. But you can see that those are the options available to configure a multiple choice activity. It's pretty straightforward. And we can then go to, if I wanted to, create another slide and create other activities so that they happen in a sequence, for example. So we had a look before at the word cloud. So now we have a second slide and we can put our word cloud in there, find the question, and just see, do we have a question there or do I just need to, I've just muted Lena for a second. Okay, so in the word cloud, what is the question we're going to ask the audience? How are we feeling about X? And then they'll be able to put in their responses. Here are the conditions. How many responses do they want to be able to see it? There are some more customization options over on the right, but this is really just the dressing. If you wanted to change the wallpaper that sits behind it, for example, or the size of the words, things like that, you can play around with those settings if you like, but we're looking at the core functionality in the activity types. One more, I'm going to make another activity here. So a new slide with a new activity. This time round, I'll create one of those scales activities that we were looking at before. And it allows us to define, by default, it gives us 3 statements. So think like it, scale, type, activity, and then I can define it. You put in your prompt up the top, and then you can click and define your statements. So, oh God, what do I put in here as my statements? Italian, Japanese, and German. That could be languages, it could be food, whatever the case. I'm just demonstrating here that you put in your choices along here and then define how you want the audience to engage with this. And in the scales activity, that happens in terms of dimensions. So if you wanted to say, I hate this thing is going to be at the bottom and I love this thing at the top, you can define those there. You can customize all of the languages. You can also put in how many values you want in between. So if you want them to have 10 points that they have to rate, not just 5, you could put that in here as well. And then at that point, there's going to be 10 dots along the line that they can drag their sliders to, etc. Sonia says, let me have a look. Weekly Zoom with distance students. Do you drop the links into the chat during the Zoom? 100%. Absolutely. Yeah, that I find that the easiest. The other thing that you can do is put the instructions. So you can see at the top here, join at menti.com using this code. That's on there by default. And you actually have this option down the bottom of your settings. Do you want to show that instruction bar at the top or not? That's up to you. It's on by default. So they'll either be able to use the link that you give and click on it, or those that are looking at this before you even start talking will probably already go to the website and start engaging with it. Once they get used to that pattern behavior, they can engage with it. Right, so this is very, very bare bones, but we've just created 3 different activity types in Menti, which means that they'll happen in a sequence. Now I want to talk a little bit about how we make that available to students and our considerations that we have with making these activities. Also, sorry, before I get off topic a little bit there's also an option to turn on a QR code into the Menti that you could have on your screen. So again, you could put these up as a stimulus before you even start talking, either in a classroom or in an online meeting. QR codes are probably more a thing for in-person spaces if people have got devices and wanted to start engaging with it. You could also print that out and put that somewhere for people to start engaging with it, etc. There's lots of options here. All right, let's talk about pacing. Up here next to the title of the Mentimeter activity, there is a settings cog. And if we click on that, we'll see that by default, Mentimeter is in this format called presentation, which requires that you start presenting the activity and then that you use your arrows to move through your presentation before the audience is able to vote and engage with each part of it. So if I had here 3 different activities, when I start presenting, the audience with the link or using the join code will only be able to engage with this one until I move my presentation on to the next one. So this gives you control over when they engage with the different activities. The other option that we have here is called a survey. I don't know why it's called that, but it is, which means that they can go through and engage with all 3 of them whenever they're ready. They just go through it in their own pace. So this is our first point to think about synchronous versus asynchronous. If I give people a link to a Mentimeter that is set to survey, they can engage with it whenever they want. It stays live forever. They can move through all of the different activities when they want to, when they're happy to. But if it's set to presentation, it waits for you, for the person with control of the Menti, to move through each of the activities. So this is usually a common troubleshooting point, I'll say, that I get from academics where they're saying, my Menti, the students can't do the second activity. It's not working for them. They can't move through. It's because it's been set to presentation and it's waiting for you to move through the slides. So what I mean by that is I've clicked on present. It's going to open it up in full screen. There's the first activity. And until I click this arrow, students can't engage with the next activity type. So yes, it updates live, but they just can't vote yet. And they'll get a little message on their mobile device or their computer or whatever it is that says it's waiting for the instructor to actually progress the next activity. So that's how that function works. Now let's hop out of presenting and go back. So we talked about the difference between presentation and survey. So this is something that you need to keep in mind. There's also an option up here that you can either turn on or turn off that allows people to vote more than once across the presentation. So consider whether or not you want them to do that or not. But thanks, Michelle. That's probably the most important choice when you're building a Menti, how you want it to run, independently or with you doing the driving. All right. The other critical piece of information that we need to be across with Menti is how do we make it available to students? We know that we're going to get a link from somewhere to give to our participants. We'll call that a join link. We know that we have the ability to turn instructions on when we're building the Menti down the bottom so that they can see how to join at the top, which is the same thing as giving them the link. But that information is all collected here underneath this share button up the top right. If we click on share, we get firstly our participant information. So it's on by default, but you can toggle it off if you don't want people to engage with your Mentimeter. There's the participant link that you can copy and provide to your audience. If you wanted a physical copy of the QR code, you can get it from here and print it out. And then we also have some detail about the code. So that code that appears at the top of the page, this one with that number, it's only valid for a couple of days from when you build. It then refreshes and there's a new number. Now, that's not an issue for you if you're presenting live, but if you've printed this out somewhere or you've put it into a PowerPoint deck or something like an image of it, and you're expecting that number to still be the same a week from now, it's not going to be the case. So the link, the participant link, is always the same. It never changes. Another reason why I like giving people the link rather than relying on the code. But the actual join code expires by default in 2 days. You can make it a bit longer if you like. You can make it valid for 2 weeks, but I don't really want to have to remember how long the code's going to be valid for. So I don't usually mess around with that too much. If they want to see it on the screen and engage with it, it'll be accurate. But otherwise, I'm just giving people the participant link. All right, so that's our participant information. You're going to need to copy the link to give to the students. Next up, we've got information for our editors. If you wanted to add other collaborators to your particular Menti and they have a Mentimeter login, drop their email in here and then they'll get a notification that they can come and add to it. Otherwise, they'd need to go looking for where it is. And then lastly, we've got a slides area. And by default, if I want to give people access to the results, also referred to here as the slides, I can copy that link and that will give you access to the same results page that we were looking at before, the presentation. So you want a participant link to give to your students and probably a results page either to look at live so you can see those results coming up. And I usually make a record of both of those pieces of information, the participant link and the results page. If I was to put that into a browser, it opens up for me because I'm the creator. It will show me the full Mentimeter. For students who haven't logged in, let's see what it gives me. This is a different web browser, so it doesn't know that I'm the owner. It's not going to let me make changes to this. So participant link and the results. For me to actually share it with the students, I've been using the present option. But next to present, this is another interesting thing to show you in Menti. We've got a thing called Mentimote. I'm not sure if you're across Mentimote at all, but what it is it gives you a little remote that allows you to control the presentation and move through the activities. So if I click present, it opens up in full screen. I can't see anything else, and I have to actually concentrate entirely on this results page until I kind of back out of it and get rid of it. It's a bit annoying for me sometimes because I'm usually juggling multiple browser tabs and other things, and I just want the activity to be live and look at the results when I'm ready to look at them. So if that's you and you want control of the activity, but you don't want to have this full screen on top like this, you can use Mentimote. So present, drop down, open Mentimote, and it opens up this little control screen in a browser tab. So I'll make that a bit smaller. And we'll have a look at what this does. So this activity is now live. It's being presented, but I can have this wherever I want it and move through those activities when I want to. So it gives you a little bit more control over the Mentimeter presentation if you want to control that pace. I'm ready for the audience to engage with this thing now, move through to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, without having to launch the whole presentation full screen view. So that's what Mentimeter is used for. It means that you don't just have to suddenly have all of your resources and your screen and everything else taken up by the screen. It gives you a little bit more control over that. Let me stop there and see if I've lost everybody yet, or are we still okay? Okay, looks like we're still doing all right. That's good. Last thing I want to show you in the build interface in Mentimeter is that we have one other way of making this Mentimeter board set of activities available to students. Underneath the share button, when we go to our slides tab at the end, there is an option here to embed the Mentimeter. So if I take that and copy our embed code, what it means is that I can go into my Brightspace site, for example, find a content area. Let's say that I'm going to build a new page in here. Give me a new page. I'm going to switch across to my embed code. This little button here is where we put in our embed code. And paste, Control V. And what I'm going to get now on this page is my Mentimeter live results. So the activity can be embedded asynchronously for students to engage with inside your subject site. This is the results. The other thing that we need in this space is actually the link for students to be able to engage with it. They could probably read those instructions, I guess, and figure it out themselves, but I'm going to give them the participant link. So let's find that and say under our share settings, give me the link for our participants. I'm going to go back to my subject site and we'll do this again. Cancel out of this. I'm going to make a new page. Now you can dress this up as much as you like, but I'm going to say click here to vote or put in your choices, whatever. I can highlight that, left click and drag in Brightspace will give me the little link button, and I can paste in the Mentimeter voting button. And now the students have a way to engage with the activity. And directly underneath it, I want them to see the results updating live in real time as they put in their choices. So I'm going to go down a few lines, grab that embed code, which is again underneath the slides tab in Share. You can watch back the recording if you need to look at how I'm doing this again. Copy the embed code, hop into the site. I'm going to put it underneath here. I told you before you could use the source code button to drop in embed if you need to. Another easy way to do it is to go up to insert stuff, little button there. And right down the bottom, there's an option to insert embed code. So there's two ways to get to it. Then I can just paste in that embed code and hit next. It blocks the preview. That's lovely. Just allow it. Thanks. Okay. And insert. So it's now going to insert that Mentimeter activity directly underneath so they'll be able to vote and see the results live. So let's hit save and close. And there's my Mentimeter activity embedded, and as each student votes, the results will be updated live. So if I went here and clicked on the voting address as a student, and I'm going to say the sky is in fact green, submit, and then it's taking me through each of those individual activities, because remember, I didn't just have one, I had multiples. If you're going to embed an activity like this in Menti, you probably want to do just one activity on one slide so that they're not trying to deal with multiple activities. Just embed it as many times as you like. So let's see now how those results appear in the subject site for the students. So I'll just go back. Look at the content. Okay, so there's the vote, and here's my student choice being updated on the spot. So at this point, we have an activity type that I can run live with the students, but I can also embed it and put the link for them to vote as well as the results all in the same space in the subject site, and we have asynchronous engagement. At that point, you can just say, you go and put in what you need to over there when you're ready to at your point. And the only thing you need to look out for when you're doing this is that your Mentimeter activity pacing, which we looked at before, is set to survey so that they can move through it when they're ready to. It doesn't require you to be there moving the presentation and the activities along. All right, I have gone over a whole bunch of information very, very quickly in Mentimeter, but what I want to point out to you is that in today's Padlet board for Mentimeter, I've also included a link or a document rather for a quick guide on how to use Menti, which is a lot more detail in a document. So I'm going to give you the link to the Padlet board, but you can download the Menti quick guide if you want to walk through any of that as well. So let me just grab the link to the Padlet board and I'm going to put it right here. Okay, so you can grab the Padlet board if you need to. So I did say about 2/3, 70% Mentimeter, and then we get into some of these Zoom tools, which is about now. But let me stop there and check in with you guys. How did you find all of that? Do we have any burning questions? Did I go too fast? Probably, maybe. What do we think? Sonia, go ahead.
Thanks, Lockie. Just the one question. So I put one in about the asynchronous. Oh God, I can't talk. I'm thinking because a lot of students don't attend the live Zoom, of course, because they can't, because that's why they do distance. So what would I do when I put the Zoom up, would I put the link separate or let them know the link's in the recordings to the Menti? Is that how, when they're watching it, they will just click on it as if they were doing it like
Look,
live? Is that how it works? Or
it's a really good
thank you.
question. There's a couple of responses there. One of them is during the live session with the students, you're going to be giving them the link to the Zoom to the Menti activity. So that's the first part that deals with those people who turn up on the spot. You give them the link. For everyone either engaging with it beforehand or who can't make it, or you want to collect their responses afterwards, etc. You'll need to provide that information elsewhere. And where do you do it in a Brightspace site? Well, you can't do it within the online meeting tool area because it just has links to the meeting. So that means you're probably going to be putting it in an announcement, in a discussion forum post, potentially. If it's going with other materials, I'd probably think about using an area of the discussion board to try and organize some of that pre and post information around your online meetings. So if you were kind of saying, like, in this week's online tutorial, for example, we're going to be looking at these issues coming up. Here's the pre-reading, or here's some critical things for you to think about. There's also a Mentimeter where I need your feedback on X. Here's the link. You can provide it in there. The discussion forum tool is probably one of the best ways of providing information in and around a live event. And that way people can go back to it or revisit it and know where to find it as well. I think that's not a bad way. If you are looking to embed it within your learning materials, like the content area that we did before, keep in mind that the intent within your content is it's going to be reused session after session after session. So is this something that will then need to be reset each time you run the subject, like you collect the student votes once and then you need to reset it? Since I've mentioned that, I better show you how to do it. Inside Menti, when you've collected your results and people have been voting and you want to use it again or reset it, you go up here to results. And there's going to be a button that says clear the results down here. And that's it. So get rid of that, clear the results, and then it's all blank, ready to be engaged with again, with all of the choices gone. All right, happy to talk more about that afterwards, Sonia, if you want to, or that scenario, etc. But for now, let's move on and have a look at some Zoom tools. Now, Zoom has 3 different tools I'm going to talk about here for audience engagement. There are others, but the ones we're looking at today are poll, quiz, and survey. The difference between them, let's start with the difference between a poll and a quiz. A poll is a Zoom activity that doesn't have a right or a wrong answer. You're simply getting responses from the students. A quiz is a poll where you've identified which ones are right, answers are right, and which ones are wrong. That's the difference between those two in Zoom language. A survey is an independent, standalone way of getting information from your cohort, and it doesn't happen during the live meeting. It's not part of the live Zoom experience. So there are many survey tools around. Zoom has one. So what I'm going to show you here is what those tools look like and where you access them, and when you run a Zoom meeting, what they look like. Okay, so let me close a few other tabs here. Mentimeter and other things happening in the background. Where I'm going to start initially is I'm going to open the Zoom desktop application. So hopefully you've got a Zoom button sitting somewhere on your desktop that you can open up, and it will look like this once it opens, the Zoom workplace, and then you'll see these 4 little icons, and hopefully this looks a bit familiar to you. If you can't find it on your desktop and you're on a personal device, etc., just type the word Zoom into your search bar and you'll be able to find it there, right, if it's not on the desktop. From this space, this is called the Zoom desktop app. We also call it the front end of Zoom. You'll find a tab here under the More options that says Surveys. And the Surveys button in Zoom cleverly refers actually to all 3 types of activity. So it means that you can create surveys, polls, and quizzes all from this one spot. Now, and use them basically. If you create a poll or a quiz, you'll be able to use them within your live Zoom meeting and bring it up and access them. With a survey, you can create it and then distribute it when you're ready to. So I have a poll here that I'd created beforehand. If I actually click on the options, you'll see that it allows me to create a series of questions. The language that we have here is single choice, which actually means multiple choice to most of us. You choose between, but it has one answer, one response possible. Multiple choice actually means multiple responses possible. A matching activity, a ranking activity, short answer, long answer, fill in the blank, and a rating scale. A little bit more information about these. Short and long answer in Zoom, which allow you to get open responses from students, have a limit of 255 characters. So they're not going to be able to write essays, but you'll be able to get certainly a paragraph or so out of them if you need to, if that's what you're looking for, or it could just be much shorter. There's actually not really much difference between those two question types. So you create either one or more questions that are either going to be a poll or a quiz, and you'll see a button up the top here that says make it a quiz. And at that point, it wants to know which one is the correct answer. So where it's saying here, please set the answer. So if you're going to quiz the students in terms of there are right and wrong answers, that's what you're going to need to do. You start creating a poll and then hit that button there to start identifying correct responses. You can put in stimulus images if you need to. So I've said here, this is an open response, short answer question. Describe how you're feeling. And again, they get to type in what you can then specify how many characters they're going to spend on it. You also get to determine if they're required to answer it or not. What other question types have I put in here? There's a rating 0 to 10 option that you can build your questions in. So I've got out of 10, how prepared are you for the upcoming exam? And there's also a like it scale, like rating option that you can build into the question set as well. Okay, it's called a rank order activity. So I've got some samples there for you. There's a preview option here, which is great. So if I want to see how this is going to appear to the students, click on preview and it removes all of the editing options, but I can now see how the poll is going to appear to students if I was to run it in a live Zoom meeting. And then they could hit submit when they were finished. It's all very well for me to show you this inside this creation or build interface, but I think you're probably more interested in seeing it in a Zoom meeting. So let's run an actual Zoom meeting and see what those questions look like. I'm going to start a new meeting here. Do you need my webcam? Probably not. Whatever, start the meeting. All right, let's drag this over here. Can't run the video because I'm using it in Teams. Bad luck. Okay, so here's my live Zoom meeting, and we find our polls and quizzes option down here. As long as you are the host, you'll be able to access this. If you want your co-hosts or other people to be able to access polls and quizzes, they're going to need to be added as collaborators to the poll or the quiz. Normally, I like to think that most of the time the person that creates the meeting is also the one running the meeting, but I know that's not always the case. So if you've got interactives that you want to use in your Zoom meetings that you want them to be able to run, you've got to give them access to do that. If I click on the polls and quizzes option, it'll give me a list of all of those polls that I'd previously built. So I was running poll number 7 before, so I can launch. And here's that poll for me to be able to, well, for the students to be able to engage with. So I'm not a participant at this stage, so I can't vote, but I can see the results as they're coming in from the students. So for each person that identifies a response, this little bar against each is going to get bigger or smaller, and I'll see a percentage of how many people have completed it. So if there's 20 people in the meeting and 5 of them have voted, it'll go 5 out of 20, and that would be 25% of the cohort, right? So that's what those numbers on the right are going to indicate. And those answers, that will update live. I'll be able to see this, but the students will not be able to see the results until you end the poll. right? So the poll of the quiz is for during the live Zoom meeting. You run it, they vote on it, then you end the poll. You'll see there's a QR code option there if you wanted to give a QR code link to people as well. But it requires that you launch the poll and you end the poll. So once you've finished with the poll and the result and the students have voted and you're ready to share the results, you hit end the poll, and now we have a share results button, and that will display it to the students in the Zoom meeting. Otherwise, they can't see it unless you've got a bit of a hack like this where you're sharing your screen like I am and you're showing them what you see. So the workaround for it, if you want them to see the results as they come in, is that you share your screen and they see the host screen as well. It's a bit, otherwise you're going to need to end the poll, share the results, and then it will be displayed to them. How do the students receive the poll activity? That's a great question. When you launch the poll, it will open up in the Zoom meeting in front of them, and they will then be able to vote with it. So there isn't a link to it as such. It's a part of the live Zoom meeting. So a poll or a quiz launches for them inside the Zoom meeting, and it prompts them to vote on it on the spot. So it's interactive. They'll click on it with their mouse, for example, or type in their responses, their short answers, etc. The other options that we have here, apart from sharing the results, you can also download those results if you need to, is that you can relaunch it. So if it's the type of activity that you want to run again later in the session to see if their position on things has changed, you can relaunch it. If you want to download the results, it will give you a CSV file, an Excel file with the answers and the responders' names. You can, in fact, launch the results in a web browser view as well, which is quite an interesting little view. Ah, really? I've got to be signed in, of course, and it's forgotten who I am. Let's go Charles Sturt. Let me launch that again from Zoom so it stops trying to do that. Results in a browser. Beautiful. So here's my poll, and then it will give me more of a visual representation with bars, etc., of the survey results. And this might be a nicer way to engage with the Zoom poll or quiz results as they come in. That's up to you, whether you want to take them to a page where they can see the results, whether you just want to look at them yourself separately, whether you want to download them as an Excel file, etc. Is the activity captured in the recording? That is an excellent question, Sonia. The answer is, if you've chosen to share the results, like so, that will be captured in the recording. When you are looking at those results yourself as they're coming in live, and if you're not sharing your screen like I was, they're not going to be in the recording. Right? So it's about when you make the recording is basically a student facing artifact. So it's about what you make available to the students during the live event. That's what will be captured in the recording as well. Can this be done asynchronously? That is an excellent question as well. The answer is no. So a poll or a quiz must be done in the live Zoom meeting. This is where we can talk about surveys. So let me stop there for a second, hop out of this Zoom meeting, and I'm going to open that tab again, more surveys. Let's make this a bit bigger. When you go to add a new poll, quiz, or survey, it'll give you the choice between those two different types of activities. I'm going to create a survey, and what we'll notice is it gives me exactly the same question type options as a poll or a quiz. It is exactly the same, but it's basically an asynchronous poll at that point. So if I created multiple question types, I want a single choice, give me another one. I want a short answer, give me another one, right? Create as many questions as you like. You'll notice that when you're creating the question as well, it's going to ask, does it have to be required? So a mandatory question or voluntary. I can duplicate, I can edit, I can add images if I need to. The other things we need to keep in mind is that there is a setting up here, this tiny little settings cog. I don't know if I can zoom in, I can't. Click on the settings cog and we'll see, do we want the results for this to be anonymous? So do you want your responders to have their names identified? And this is on by default. If you want their names to be visible, you uncheck it. So think about that in terms of the type of survey that you want to send out. And then you have some options on whether you want them to see the type of question and if they're numbered, etc. All right, so I've got a survey here, and at that point, this is ready. This incredible survey is now ready to go out after you've customized it. I can preview it, so if I can see how it's going to be. There's also some theming options with the survey tool if you want a background color or a banner across the top. But I'm ready with this, so I'm going to hit save. The survey's saved, and it gives me a link to the survey. So at this point, it is now asynchronous. It is live. You can shorten it if you want a shorter URL, but it doesn't really matter. But this is an anonymous survey that involves 4 questions. Here's the link, everybody. Post that where you will. So we have an asynchronous method of engagement at that point, and those results will come in. You can also give them a QR code and stick it around the classroom or whatever. If you want people to vote and choose and engage with the survey, you can. But those are the 2 ways of provisioning the survey, and it stays live until you make it not live. And the way that we do that, let's hit done. Find me some surveys. There's 2 of them. In my dashboard, I've got 2 surveys. I had one here called Plans for the Weekend. Great, there are 2 questions. See this little publish toggle? If I turn that off, it's not going to be live anymore. And then we also, there's a shortcut to the link to the survey if you wanted to open it, but there's also a button on the right that allows you to preview it, to copy it and work on a new one, and also who to collaborate with. If you want to send this survey directly to individuals, you can share it to them. But the easiest way to look at this when you're ready is to open up this little statistics button on the right-hand side next to the survey. So you can see here, it's published, it's available, and I can now look at the results in a visual format. We get our bars and our results, and then I can filter that down. If I want to see the results in terms of individual responders, so that's where your anonymous, not anonymous thing might come in handy. So there's one person's response who's anonymous, there are their results. So this is another way of engaging the audience or getting information or feedback from them, but you just need to work through the customization. And then lastly, over here on the top right-hand side, we have an option to close the survey, which does the same thing as toggling the publish button, right? It basically makes it no longer live. So we have had a lightning tour of Mentimeter and Zoom polls, quizzes and surveys. I will point out as well that whilst I've showed you how to access the Zoom poll survey quiz tool through the Zoom desktop application, you can also access it from the Zoom backend, the Zoom portal. If I'm speaking in French here, just watch this. If we go to charlessturt.zoom.us, does this page look familiar to some of you, hopefully? Right, the CSU Zoom portal, if you go to charlessturt.zoom.us, when you sign in here, this is what we call the back end of Zoom. You will notice that there is in fact a surveys tab over here on the left-hand side as well. This will take you into exactly the same place with a listing of all of your polls, quizzes, and surveys in here as well. So you can create it either from the front end or the back end. And all of those will be retrievable for you in the live meeting for polls and quizzes. The surveys are an asynchronous artifact, so they're able to be engaged with at any time. All right, we have 1 minute to go. Amazingly, we got through all of that right on time. So look, I'm going to stop there. I am going to stop the recording as well and say a big thank you for everyone for coming out and joining us today. I hope you've got something valuable out of the session.